Welcome to Hand and Heart DIY Studio. Today we're going to be making pot roast. Come along. Today we're going to be using the Tyson Pot Roast that I pick up from Walmart. It's usually under $20. You get all of the vegetables and the beef. I also add in a can of carrots, sliced carrots, and we're going to be making some yellow cornbread and brownies for dessert. Here I'm just opening up the can and draining all the juice out. I'm going to go ahead and cut all these vegetables up, and I cut the carrots in half. I also cut the potatoes in half depending upon the size. If you notice that they're really big, then you can cut them into fourths, but these red potatoes are normally good in just halves. I noticed that I run out of space on my little cutting board, so I go ahead and pull my crock pot bowl over. This is the Ninja that I got for Christmas. I love this thing. Now you'll notice I'm just putting my vegetables inside the Ninja crock pot. I do not add any oils or anything to the crock pot itself. Just speeding up this dicing of the vegetables so we're not here all day. You'll notice I'm cutting my celery up a lot smaller. I do not like the texture, but I like the taste. Went ahead and cut that one into fours because it was kind of big. Now we're going to move on to our onion. I cut this in eighths. I'll toss in those carrots real quick. I cut this in eighths. So they're not so big, but it is enough to give it flavor throughout the whole dish. Just separating the onion petals. It's our seasoning packet. These are the frozen mushrooms that I purchased from Walmart. I like to keep these on hand because I never know when I will need them. Like today, making this roast. If you get the fresh ones from the produce department, they only last a day or two in the refrigerator. So I like to get these frozen sliced mushrooms. They're around the same cost and they last a lot longer in the freezer. I'm going to go ahead and slice open my roast package. Now I do not rinse this. I pull it straight out of the package and right into the crock pot. I'm going to separate the meat just a little bit. During this time, I'm going to wash my hands and change my gloves and grab a cup of cold water to mix the seasoning with. Once you've gotten all your clumps out, you're going to make sure that it's very well stirred. You're going to pour half the mixture over the top. And you're going to flip your roast, so that way you get seasoning on both sides. Now we're going to set our crock pot on low for 6 hours and hit start. About an hour or so before it's done, I don't touch it between then and now. I stir it really good, just mix up those vegetables, and I will flip the beef over to ensure that everything is very well incorporated. Has an hour left. Now that that's got about an hour or so left, we're going to go ahead and get started on the cornbread. I'm going to grab my pan and my bowl. I'm going to take my pan over to the sink. That's where I spray my Pam on. Measuring out my milk. I crack my egg into my measuring cup. I'm going to wash my hands and come back. Of course, you know that I've sped it up a little bit. I'm going to mix in the cornbread mix. Mix it in really good, and then it says to let it set for a few minutes before you pour it in your pan. Now, one thing that I noticed after I put this in the oven is the butter that is sitting next to my pan never got melted, and I normally put that in the mix. I usually put a half a stick in the mix, and I didn't do it this time because I got sidetracked recording this video and totally forgot to put it in there. So and this is not the same scraper that I used on the seasoning mix. I have a couple of these scrapers that are the same color, so I'm going to let that sit. In advance time here, 5 minutes later, our oven is preheated, and we're going to go ahead and put this in the pan. And you know, I still didn't notice at this point that I had forgotten to put the butter in there. And I would suggest using 2 boxes for a pan of this size. I normally do, but with it just being me and my husband, I was like, you know, we'll just do 1 box tonight. And then, of course, after it's done, I noticed that it was very small and thin, and I was like, why did it turn out this way? Well, it was because I only used 1 box. And apparently didn't put my butter in either, so. Don't ask me why this box is upside down. It just is. It's good to go, ready to go in the oven. Now, magic. It's done, and then I was like, you know, I forgot to put butter in it, so I'm going to put a little extra butter in the top. So I poke holes in the top while it's still hot and put butter on. Ended up using way too much butter, but I ended up scraping it off and putting it on the underneath side of the lid and using it later on the cornbread whenever we were eating it. All right, so now the roast is done. I've pulled it out and let it sit, and then I sliced it up, put it back in the crock pot. And this is the finished version. Cornbread, potatoes, and sliced roast. It was very good. Now we're going to move on to the brownies, because you know we always love some dessert. I'll show you what I do with my brownie mix. It's a little different, I believe. Instead of water and vegetable oil, I use butter and milk. It gives it a more richer flavor. And again, I don't know why I turned the box upside down. The way that I was filming, I thought that my camera was backwards. But as you see, I used the butter, the same amount of vegetable oil that it calls for. If it calls for 3/4 of a cup of vegetable oil, I never put vegetable oil in any of my baking goods. I tend to use butter, canola oil, olive oil, things of that nature. I do not use vegetable oil at all. I believe it changes the flavor of everything. So here I'm putting in the 3 tablespoons of milk. It calls for 3 tablespoons of water. Again, I use milk. I did melt down the butter. Which you'll see here in a minute. I crack my eggs into the measuring cup. The measuring cup is already dirty, and instead of dirtying something else to crack my eggs in to make sure that they're still good, I crack it in the measuring cup. Now, if you want more cake-like brownies, you can always add an extra egg, and it will make it more cakey versus fudgy. Now while I've got my butter in the microwave, I am going to go ahead and add in the brownie mix. Grab my scissors I always end up cutting them with scissors instead of trying to open the package and getting cocoa powder everywhere. If you'll notice, I broke my yolks, and I'm only using a fork to do this. If you overmix brownies, they do not come out fudgy, they come out tough. So my microwave beeps, so I'm going to grab my butter. There's my butter. Now this is Land O'Lakes unsalted butter. You could use salted if you like. You could use a totally different brand if you'd like. But that's just the butter that I'm using here. This is not sped up. This is just me mixing vigorously. It does come out a lot thicker without the water and the vegetable oil because you're using butter and milk. The batter is a lot thicker. Making sure to scrape all the sides. Now we're going to let it sit, and we're going to grab our pan. Upside down pan. This is my 9 by 13. I did spray it with Pam. I go to the freezer and grab my pecans. I keep my nuts in the freezer. It sounds crazy, but it's something that I've always done. Keeps any contaminants out and keeps them fresher longer. Of course, they're upside down. I just get a handful and I use my hands to break them up instead of chopping them. Dirtying up more dishes. I can just crush them and break them with my hands. Now for me, one handful is about a half a cup. And I'm just breaking them up with my fingers. Three handfuls. Give it another mix. Taking yet another hand spatula, making sure to scrape all the sides. See why I love this hand spatula? You can take in between, I guess, the thumb of the spatula and the finger part of the spatula and scrape the edge of your bowl. Comes in very handy. Huh, no pun intended. Making sure it's evened out. Because the batter is so thick, we want to make sure it's evened out in the pan. Now I'm going to take a handful of pecans and just kind of sprinkle them over the top a little bit and put this in the oven for the directions on the box. And this is what they look like. Very dense and fudgy with lots of pecans. They were so good. Simple food made with care. It always feels like home. Thanks for joining me today. And if you'd like to see more, like, follow, and subscribe.